In the summer of 1969, events took place that would forever change the world. A three-day gathering in upstate New York turned into a seminal moment of rock and roll history. But a series of gruesome murders in California cut short the peace and love of the 1960s. As colleges across the nation churned with protests against the war, one event that summer would forever change the lives of a small group of people. For 10 days, the USS Frank E. Evans provided artillery support for Marine amphibious operations on the coast of South Vietnam. Low on ammunition and supplies, the Frank E. Evans made its way to the U.S. Naval Base in Subic Bay, the Philippines. But before she was set to return to the gun line in Vietnam, the Frank E. Evans was ordered to join a joint task force for maneuvers in the South China Sea. Several days in, tragedy struck.
The exercise was Exercise Sea Spirit. It was a combined exercise. There were Australian, British, New Zealand, American ships involved, and we had planes in the air. And USS Frank E. Evans was plane guard at the time, which meant that if one of the planes went down, they were responsible for ensuring the safety of the pilots.
A crew is made up of officers and enlisted men, snipes and deck apes, New Yorkers and everybody else. But it's a family. The Frank E. Evans was more than that. 3 brothers from a small town in Nebraska served aboard the ship, as did a father and his son. But in the early morning of June 3rd, 1969, their world would forever change.
And I could see the Melbourne at that time. It was in front of us, and it was to the port side.
Well, the night of the accident was almost clear. It was like daylight. There was a full moon, no cloud, smooth seas.
I was on duty at the time. Ralph Hall, he was on the throttles, and he got an emergency back full.
All at once, it was like the deck rose up and the lights went out and there was steam coming down and it flooded out.
I was sleeping in a rack up in the rear end of the ship. Next thing I knew, I was laying on a few other of the guys on the floor of the ship or on the deck.
It was like, wow, did a plane crash into us? What happened? Still no rhyme or reason of what was going on.
And it wasn't until we went outside that we actually saw what had happened.
As the task force zigzagged through the South China Sea, the Frank E. Evans was ordered to take up position behind the Australian aircraft carrier. But the American destroyer never made it.
It's always been my impression that we pulled what's commonly referred to as a fishhook turn.
Somehow, some way, to keep it short, we crossed the front of it, and that's when the accident happened.
What should have been a normal procedure went terribly wrong. That miscalculation led not only to the death of 74 American sailors, but in addition, the complete destruction of the Frank E. Evans.
The ship started taking a roll, woke up and the ship was taking a roll, which had happened lots of times, but this roll kept going and going. And
I felt quite a bit over, at least 45 degrees over at the time. And the feeling was, this is it.
I got tossed or thrown, and next thing I knew, I was underwater.
No warning was sounded, and most of the crew were caught unawares below deck.
People are screaming, "Where's my shoes? Where's my pants?" And I said, "Pack your shoes and your pants. Get the hell out of here. We're going down."
Everything went kind of black down there, and the emergency battery backups were coming on. And I remember somebody just yelling, "Get the hell out of here."
I found my dog tags, and I thought, well, if I'm going to be lost at sea, I at least want to know where to send my body, so I put my dog tags on.
I went up the outboard hatch, then the outboard ladder onto the main deck, and when I got on main deck, I was looking back aft, saw a bunch of activity, bunch of people, and then I looked forward, and there was nothing there, you know.
We knew we was in serious trouble because there was the other half was gone.
We saw the front end of the ship sitting off our port bow forward section, sitting up in the air. Heard the screaming, the yelling, and saw the blokes on it, and you saw that disappear before your eyes, and you knew you couldn't do anything about that.
There was air pockets in that run in. And it went down, I hear, in about 2 minutes what they were telling me. So most of them didn't get out.
He was the one that we found on our flight deck. When the Evans rolled over, it flipped and came back. It flipped him straight up onto our flight deck. He was in a mess. One of the side of his face was completely missing.
With the front half gone, it now became a race to keep the aft section afloat.
And I started swimming towards the carrier. It's the first time I realized the ship had actually been cut in half.
I was one of the very fortunate ones. I stayed on board the after half that stayed afloat.
When the Melbourne pulled up to what was left of us, and they were hanging right over us, the flight deck, dropped down cargo nets.
We climbed up on our upper deck, stuck your arms up, and they pulled you onto the Melbourne. We were stuck to the side of the Melbourne at the time.
I started up the net, and I got about halfway up, and that was it. I couldn't make it anymore. They had to help me. I was totally exhausted.
The survivors were brought on board the Melbourne and sat down on the quarterdeck, which is at the after end of the ship. And most of us went down there later on and talked to the guys, talked to the American guys. A lot of sailors brought up clothing for the Evans guys because they didn't have clothing. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and you know, a lot of them were just sleeping in shorts or whatever.
We should never consider the things that happen to us very lightly, because we never know when you're going to have a life-changing experience.
The sailors of the Frankie Evans performed their duty that night, with 74 paying the ultimate price. Unfortunately, the U.S. government has a different opinion on the definition of duty.
Well, it's a mixture, I guess, of disbelief and disgust. I can't believe that any nation would not put the names of those 74 guys on the Vietnam Wall. And for some reason, the US government or Department of Defense or whoever has decided that they don't qualify to have their names on the wall, which to me is, it's incredible. I can't believe that.
Their name should be on the wall. That was the reason we were in South China Sea from the start. You know, they like to use excuses because they like to downplay the Vietnam War.
And those fellas wouldn't have been lost if things hadn't been going on. So I believe they deserve their place on the wall, yes.
There are 58,260 names on the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C. The first name dates to 1956. The last 4 names were added in 2008. Yet, you will find none of the sailors' names who gave their lives on that June night in 1969. Not the 3 brothers from Nebraska, not the son who served with his father, and none of the 70 other sailors who perished off the coast of Vietnam and disappeared forever into the depths of the South China Sea.
And I'm hoping that through the association that we can help them and get closure and get a monument going and get the names on there and let everybody know that we didn't forget.
In 2007, House Resolution 1172 was introduced before Congress that would have allowed the names of the 74 to be added to the Vietnam War Memorial. The bill died in committee, and no vote was ever taken.